It's hard to keep your emotions while on trial, especially if you're the one getting sentenced. From anger to regrets, see this video of the 20 craziest reactions of convicts getting a life sentence. Number 20. Dexter Johnson. Dexter Johnson, who was only 19 years old but was an experienced criminal, received a death sentence in 2007. He was found guilty of raping, killing, and plundering 2 additional people besides Maria Aparecci. He initially understood the judge's punishment when it was announced at his hearing, but he threw a chair in the next second and began to yell. After that, the court staff had to handle him. Following that, Johnson's sentence was upheld while the courts investigated claims that he had a mental disability. Number 19. Luis Bracamontes. Luis Bracamontes was charged with the killing of a pair of cops. He gained fame for his shocking and bizarre courtroom behavior when he was put on trial. He was observed smiling at his crimes and pleading for death during his outbursts. Number 18. Ricky Hand. Ricky Hand is a convicted criminal who committed several severe crimes, including armed robberies. He showed up wearing a sling to his court appearance. Everyone in the court assumed that an injury might have caused it, but that was not the case. When the judge sentenced him to life in prison, he was stunned and exclaimed, "You just gave me 40 years?" Then, what he did would come as a surprise to everyone who witnessed it. He hurled a bottle of stored feces at his attorney after reaching into his sling and pulling out a handful. This is definitely a stinky act. Number 17. Ted Kaczynski. This Unabomber had 8 life sentences to his name for his active participation in terrorism, which resulted in the killing of 3 people and nearly a dozen injuries. He was captured, tried, and sentenced to 8 life terms. But rather than being in sadness, he saw them as a success. Before his 50-year class reunion, he chose to list his phrases as a tribute to the College Alumni Association. Unfortunately, they apologized later for publishing it. Number 16. Danta Wright. Usually, the family of the victims read the impact statement during murder trials. In this case, when the family of slain 18-year-old Jordan Klee shared their feelings, Wright laughed and had to be restrained from laughing. Wright didn't believe it was real, and he even told his family that he would come back. Wright was then sentenced to 25 to 50 years for the crime. Number 15. Erica Mae Butts. Erica Mae Butts, along with Shanita Latrice Cunningham, went to trial for the murder of a 3-year-old. They were babysitting the kid while this took place. While Cunningham pleaded guilty, Erica entered an Alford plea. They expected some leniency from the judge, but they didn't find any, as he sentenced both to life in prison. As the judge continued to read the sentence, Butts had a complete room breakdown. She began to scream, collapse, and hyperventilate. Meanwhile, Cunningham also fainted and had to be removed from the courtroom. Number 14. Bass Webb. Bass Webb wasn't disciplined while he was on trial. His actions led to more issues. Years after being arrested and receiving a 50-year term for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, he was once more given a life sentence for a different murder. Webb spat at the judge when she asked him a question, because the court already knew who the victims were. He received an additional 37 years in prison for this incident. Number 13. Ronnie O'Neill. Ronnie was found guilty of the murders of his girlfriend and their child. He received 3 consecutive life sentences and an additional 60 years of imprisonment during his trial, since the judge deemed it the worst crime she had ever witnessed. O'Neill subsequently informed the court that he loved the victims more than anyone else and would not accept responsibility. Number 12. TJ Lane. This 18-year-old boy is the prototypical cold-blooded killer. He was found guilty of 18 counts of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder in connection with a school shooting. He showed up for his sentencing wearing a homemade t-shirt with the word "killer" handwritten on it. Also, during his sentencing, he turned around from his chair to address the victims' families and gave them the finger while making vulgar comments. Number 11. Michael Marin. Michael was convicted of arson and insurance fraud. At his hearing, he faced 7 years, which could be extended to 21 years. When the judge pronounced him guilty and was sentencing him, he lifted his arms to his face. No one knew what he was about to do next. He had a cyanide capsule in his arm, and as soon as the judge gave him the sentence, he put it in his mouth and swallowed it. Shortly after, he died. Number 10. Seth Welch and his wife. Tatiana Fusari and Seth Welch were detained for starving to death their 10-month-old daughter, which resulted in her murder. Due to the way they responded to the news, their hearing video has become very popular. In this video, the pair are shown standing side by side as the court hands down a life sentence without the possibility of release. Welch is standing in complete disbelief as Fusari starts to cry. He might not have anticipated the harsh penalty for the crime. Number 9. Adrian Dunn. During a bad drug deal, he shot and killed Raheem Charles. Prosecutors at his trial brought up his criminal history, claiming that it significantly impacted how likely he was to commit a crime. The court agreed with their argument and gave him a life sentence. When Dunn heard this, he yelled at the court officers and tried to fight them, but he was eventually carried out of the courthouse. Number 8. Trey Relford. You never anticipate witnessing such a moving scene in court. Trey Relford, the perpetrator, may be seen here going to the victim's father to beg for forgiveness when he was hot on his trail. Despite losing his child, the father hugged the murderer and expressed forgiveness before the judge. Number 7. Michael Swanson. Michael Swanson was a murderer while he was just 18 years old. He was taken before the judge to stand trial for 2 homicides. The reason is the murder of a store clerk while committing a robbery. He didn't stop there. He also carried out an identical crime in a different area. The cruelest aspect of his life sentence is that he laughed during it. He responded that the extension wouldn't change much, even after the judge threatened to extend his term. Number 6. Jeremy Christian. This is Jeremy Christian, who was detained for the murder of 2 rail passengers in Portland and the attempted murder of a 3rd. He was found guilty of 12 offenses in total. He told a survivor he should have also killed her while on trial. The victim wanted to spend his life in prison. He then chanted George Floyd after cursing out the judge. Number 5. Manson Bryant. In 2018, Manson Bryant was found guilty of armed robbery, kidnapping, and other crimes. He stated before his sentence that he attempted to avoid doing all of these things while under the influence of narcotics. He even complimented and thanked the court for its judgment. However, the judge's 22-year prison sentence caused him to change his tune. Bryant began yelling and calling the judge a racist right away. He yelled and swore for a long time until the judge gave the additional 6 years. Number 4. Keith Ferguson. Keith Ferguson can be seen throwing a tantrum in the court. He was detained on suspicion of killing his wife and her father. He failed to stand or raise his hand when he was in court for his sentencing. As an alternative, he swore in front of witnesses and told the judge that he didn't care if they killed him. He received an unalterable life sentence. Number 3. Ryan Stone. This guy is Ryan Stone, who got a whopping 160 years for leading the police on a high-speed chase across 60 miles. But why was he being chased? He was accused of several crimes, including child abuse and manslaughter. When asked why he did it, he pointed the finger at the drugs. Whatever the case, at Stone's sentencing, the defense team recorded the defendant boasting about how he committed the crime and how foolish his victims were while still in custody. Number 2. Darrell Brooks. Imagine getting 6 life sentences. Unbelievable. He might have done something really terrible for that. Darrell Brooks was arrested for driving his SUV through a crowd of people attending a Christmas parade. He was charged with the murder of 6 people and several injuries. During his trial, he responded by making long-winded and ridiculous statements that lasted hours. He even insulted the district attorney and did not apologize for what he did. He was sentenced to at least 800 years. Number 1. Alan McCarty. This man first found himself in court after a custody dispute for a child. But when he threatened to assassinate the judge, things became worse. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his threats, including the judge, the solicitors, and one woman's pregnant child. When he learned of his sentence, he lost his composure again and began cursing in the courtroom. He had to be pulled out of the room after that. With that, we've come to the end of this video. If you like this video, then be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. For more videos like this, click on the links on the screen. We'll be back with more court videos. Until then, goodbye.